Washington's National Airport, at Greyhound bus terminals in Alaska and Hawaii, and in 2 tunnels on the Pennsylvania Turnpike. But the biggest and the most bizarre biological warfare test of all took place in September of 1950 in San Francisco, California. The object of the test, according to recently declassified Army documents, was, quote, to study the offensive possibilities of attacking a seaport city with a biological warfare aerosol generated from a ship located some distance offshore. And so, on a Navy ship, about the size and length of this one, the U.S. Army's secret testing team steamed out into the middle of San Francisco Bay. Attached to the railing on the fan tail of the ship were 3 huge metal canisters containing the biological agent to be used in the experiment, a bacteria named Serratia marcescens, selected because of its supposedly benign characteristics and the bright red color it produces under laboratory analysis. At precisely 1700 hours, the testing team pointed the hoses attached to the canisters skyward, opened the valves of the nozzles, and set forth an aerosol cloud of bacteria toward its intended destination, the city of San Francisco. As the cloud made its way across the bay, 3 aircraft hovered overhead, collecting meteorological data, and 20 ground stations were obtaining figures on wind direction and velocity. While all this was happening, the Army had established 43 sampling stations at various locations throughout the Bay Area to determine how great the bacteria's penetration had been. Volunteers stood by the windows of their homes, of government office buildings, even on their rooftops. All were holding sieve-like collectors similar to this one, which would trap airborne bacteria released from the ship. After these collectors had been analyzed by the lab, the Army learned that 30 square miles, or nearly all of San Francisco, had been exposed to the bacteria. Almost 800,000 persons had breathed particles of Serratia marcescens that September day in 1950.
On the lead boat, about 300 kids from various ghetto neighborhoods left the docks for an afternoon of cruising. The mayor eventually transferred to the cutter Alert, where he was joined by city officials and a few other mayors who had been invited as observers. All the boats, including Coast Guard cutters and the port's fireboat, then formed a flotilla which paraded around the bay. Each boat had not only city kids on board, but 1 police officer who will supervise and organize a day of fishing every Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday for the rest of the summer. Up to 10,000 youngsters are expected to participate this year in what is described as the best public relations program ever developed by the police department. Roland Post for Eyewitness News, San Francisco Bay.
Evans in Action Country. Stay tuned.
Former Coast Guard cutter Alert steamed into Discovery Park recently with a very unusual crew. Action Country's Bill Evans went aboard to meet the crew members.
Sensationalist secret. Some crew members seemed astonishingly young. For instance, Bob West of Sacramento and Jay Myers of Palo Alto are not old enough to have driver's licenses, yet proved very efficient handling engine room duties. The crew was co-ed and ranged in age from 14 to 19. They belonged to units from the Sea Explorers and the Mariners in San Francisco. The Mariners is the female equivalent to the Sea Explorers organization. As the Alert pulled into shore, the crew went to work securing the 125-foot, 300-ton vessel with the expertise of veterans. The job of guiding the Alert through shallow waters and around dangerous shoals fell to 19-year-old Kendra Hagenow of San Mateo. On this trip, she's serving as crew leader and acting boatswain. The skipper of the ship was Richard Stenger, who has been working with Sea Scouts for 28 years. Assisting him as executive officer was Roger Krupp. The Alert was retired in 1968 after 42 years of Coast Guard service. It was purchased by Highland Film Labs of San Francisco in 1969 to be used as an ocean research vessel. Periodically, the Alert is donated for use in non-profit maritime functions, and this Sea Scout cruise was one of them. I asked Kendra what fascinated her most about the cruise she was taking.
The people.
You like the people?
Yeah.
And of course, obviously you like being on the water.
Oh, yeah.
Is it hard work?
For me, not really, because I'm supervising.
Yeah, you
but
stand back and just shout orders, don't you?
Yeah, but the other ones, yeah, it's hard. Like in the middle of the night, you have to stand watch. You lose sleep that way, and
It's pretty neat. You skipped all that. You weren't a deckhand, were you?
yeah,
Huh?
yeah, sort of cheating.
With the alert secured, it was R&R time for the crew, and regrettably, it was also time for us to go, but there was a great temptation to play hooky and cool off in the water with them. The ship may be in young hands, but obviously they're alert ones. Bill Evans, in Action Country.
Well, I tell you, when I was a kid about that age, I'd give my right arm to have an experience like that.
I want to know
Oceanic Society has started a series of classes training boat owners in the scientific skills of pollution detection. They learn 6 different tests for water quality, which they can then perform on their own boats. There are also 16 stations in the Bay Area from the Delta to San Jose where these water samples can be turned in for further laboratory evaluation. Working in conjunction with the state and federal government, the yachtsmen could represent a small armada of pollution policemen if they can get enough volunteers. Clark Cameron, the Conservation Patrol's founder, explains the objectives.
Our goals specifically are to create a force of volunteers who are yachtsmen, who are aviators, who are scuba divers, who are capable of carrying out a couple of very simple functions. Number one is a function of detection and deterrence, to find out who's doing the polluting and where and when they're doing it, and to file reports with responsible government agencies with which we're collaborating in this. Secondly, and allied to that, is a deterrence function. Once the word gets out through media such as yours that this sort of operation is going on constantly, there are people out in boats, there are people in aircraft who are actually looking at what's happening with trained eyes, who are reporting constantly to government agencies that can enforce the laws that exist. Once this happens, we believe there will be a drop in the amount of what you might call calculated violation of the laws that's obviously going on all the time right now.
Today, members of the Conservation Patrol were also out testing the waters of various marinas in the bay to determine pollution levels. The results will be reported to the state. Roland Post for Eyewitness News on San Francisco Bay.
Out of port this morning to anchor in the bay just off Sausalito for the annual 4th of July Independence Day weekend. News Scene's Bill Slater was out there, and here's the story.
There are, of course, ways other than the traditional cookout and parade viewing to enjoy a July 4th weekend, and a group of San Franciscans apparently have found one way. It's the 5th annual Alert Cruise. The Alert is the name of the vessel. It's a retired Coast Guard cutter, which has been converted into a combination research pleasure vessel. For the past 4 years, the vessel, with its owner and captain, Barry Brose, has taken guests on a holiday weekend cruise to Santa Cruz. This year, because of efforts to conserve energy, the vessel is taking its guests from San Francisco to Sausalito. It makes little difference because the guests seem to have just as much fun no matter where they go. The vessel sleeps 35 or 70, depending, and provisions have been made to transport other guests who are visiting just for the day. A 27-foot cabin cruiser makes periodic trips to the Sausalito Ferry Terminal to bring day guests to the converted cutter. The entire situation has all the makings of the San Francisco media jet set. All the members of the crew are associated in some way with the television or film industry. Brose, the skipper, is owner of a local film lab. He explains why he does it every year.
As a research vessel that hasn't been too busy lately, we have sort of a volunteer crew that we use when we do some public service work, like for the Oceanic Society, and this is sort of the crew's little vacation outing.
Ironically, the cutter, which once was used to chase rum runners, is now being used, on occasion, as a rum runner.
It is a most unusual way to spend a July 4th weekend. One certainly doesn't have to worry about the traffic. One can imbibe as much as one desires without having to worry about how to get home. And these people can get into Sausalito if that's what they want to do. Aboard the good ship Lollipop, Bill Slater, Channel 7 News Scene.
Bill said there were 30 people on board the cutter that's owned and run by Barry Brose when he left and the boat weighed anchor. No doubt the crew was swollen by now, and we hope they have a fine 4th.